human trafficking. It's a record 288 people arrested.
They're not reporting the real numbers.
The numbers are segmented and they are fictitious.
I started my career in 1997 in the United States Border Patrol. It was one of the most violent times in recent Border Patrol history. I made my bones and my reputation on that border. I believe what is happening on the border today is intentional.
We have people in the United States of America that breed children in order to sell them.
Our own government is facilitating the absolute destruction of the American immigration system, and I can prove it point by point. I'm unafraid to speak the truth. This is just data-driven and experience-driven.
It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. I think that it's shameful that people that celebrate Doge coming in, and yet we're going to vote for another $1 billion to be added to the deficit. And so it's ironic.
It's opposite of what the Doge Commission is trying to do. So am I voting for it? No, I'm not.
We're just fundamentally unserious about spending. And as long as you got a blank check, you can't shrink government. If you can't shrink government, you can't live free.
Well, there you got some Republicans on Capitol Hill calling it a Christmas present Americans shouldn't want. Others call it a dumpster fire, as the House tries hammering out a deal to fund a government spending bill and avoid the Friday midnight shutdown deadline.
So will it pass? They got 72 hours. House Speaker Mike Johnson joins us now. Now, Mr. Speaker, you expected some blowback when you were putting this together as you try to get across the finish line and have the government pay for itself up until March. What could you tell us about this bill, and does it disturb you? Some Republicans seem to be very critical of it.
No, look, those are three of my great friends you just quoted there. They're not wrong about the government debt and deficits. It bothers us all. We've got it in our central focus. And when we start the new Congress in January, when Republicans are in control and Doge is working on all 6 cylinders, we're going to be able to scale back the size and scope of government. But before we get to that point, remember, right now, we only control 1/3 of the federal government. Remember, Democrats are still in charge of the Senate and the White House. So what we've done is the conservative play call here, my friends that you just interviewed there, or that those clips were played, were part of this decision. We decided, even though we don't normally like short-term stopgap funding measures, it made sense here. Instead of doing, Chuck Schumer and Biden spending for 2025, we pushed this decision into March. It'll be March 14th. So the feature there is that we'll have Republican-controlled Congress and Trump back in the White House, and we get to decide spending for 2025. So that was a good thing. Yeah.
But Mr. Speaker,
You believe anything that man just said? Makes sense to you? Welcome to Truth with J.J. Carroll. Speaker Johnson, sellout, coward, and compromised. There's no other way to. He's compromised. I don't know exactly how, but he's compromised. I always despise men like this. I had these kind of guys in the Border Patrol. They'd rise up, and then they would come and they would see me. They know where I stand and what I believe in, and they would try to tell me, well, JJ, we're not going to do our job, and we're going to allow illegal aliens to get by, or we're going to not go to certain areas that they are because you're not looking at the bigger picture. And then they would just go drone on for a few minutes of nonsense, and then I would just look at them and say, I'm done. I'm done. I don't even know we can be friends, right? You're so engrossed in the lies that you don't even understand who you're even speaking to, right? It's like him sitting there. Not all of them, but a good percentage of the Republicans are like, no, man, we're not voting for this. This is insane. And he's saying, well, no, actually, it's a good thing. And let me explain to you why it's good. Let me explain to you that as America is suffering under inflation, look, my stock market, my 401k, which everyone else is, went down 3 to 4% today. 3 or 4% in one day. And Mike Johnson wants to sign a bill that's going to raise their salary from $174,000 to, and I got it written down, $243,000. That's over 40%. Did you get a 40% raise going into 2025? Have you? 40, not 4%. I can almost go, yeah, cost of living, Joe Biden screwed us all, 4%. Okay, I get it. But wait a minute. You, the Congress, have created the economic system that we live in now. It's you own it. And you want to give yourself a 40% raise. They're the most grotesque group of individuals in America. If this does not scream to you constitutional amendment and for term limits, I don't know what does. I do not know what would force you to get off the sofa and demand term limits except this. Logan, let's pull up. Let the audience physically see what this bill looks like, not just talk about it. Look at that. 1,500 pages. 1,500 pages of legalese, meaning you need to go when you read this, and this says this, but you need to go back to paragraph 4, section 3, subsection 2A on page so-and-so. Then you get to that, and they go, well, now you need to fast forward, and let's go to page 1,000, section 4, little I, 2A, 6B, go back to page 2. That's what you're reading. And if I told you right now, I this boom on your desk, hey, yeah, you got 72 hours to read this and digest it, and then we're going to vote on it. What? Are you insane? Yeah, they are insane. They're corrupt. All of them are corrupt. All of them. One of the themes on our show, on my show, and I take complete ownership of it, the enemy of the people is the United States federal government. And the federal government is evil. There's evil. They're stealing from you. You can cut it, you can split hairs, but the fact remains they're stealing from you. Let's look in and see what's inside this real quick. We got an increase of 40% or more of their actual annual salary on top of all the graft and corruption that they get, right? That's just like a bonus. That's your Christmas bonus. Vaccine, mask mandates. There's a section in there where they begin to make it very convoluted for you to force congressmen and congresswomen to testify. They give them immunity. Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's in there. This is what Rand Paul says. And tell me if this is not, sounds like I wrote this tweet. I have it on my phone. I'm going to read it. Quote from Rand Paul, at Rand Paul. I had hoped to see at Speaker Johnson grow a spine, but this bill full of pork shows he is a weak man. The debt will continue to grow. Ultimately, the dollar will fail. Democrats are clueless. Big government Republicans are complicit. A sad day in America. Did I write that? Am I reading from my X account? Do you feel as if you've had enough, America? Do you feel that way? Do you feel like you just had it? Or do you need to get punched in the face a few more times? Do you need to have your wallet stolen from you a few more times? You need to make it very hard for you to pay your rent a couple more months, your mortgage. It's Christmas. I know everybody's stretched. Everyone's stretched. We feel it. I'm about to bring on a guest here in a few minutes, and he's going to dive in, and this dovetails perfectly from Speaker Johnson. Every time I see his face, just like in congressional hearings, that they say, well, Mr. Carroll, on a podcast, I heard you say that you wanted to punch the speaker in the face. Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. My father used to say this to me all the time. My father was a big alpha male. Never saw him use violence. His whole life, never saw it. But he would tell me, see that guy? I go, yeah, which guy? That guy over there? Yeah, JJ. He needs to be punched in the face. And what that meant was, this guy is a weasel. That guy's a thief, a liar, and he needs to get his face punched. Because that is what used to do in the old days. Not now. We're going to send strongly worded letters to each other and demand that you stop. Oh, okay. Sure, a strongly worded letter, a la Jim Jordan and McCall and Comer. Those. Let me tell you something. If Donald Trump finally gets in without getting murdered, and he has some kind of system in place where they disclose everything, you're going to be shocked at America. You're going to be absolutely stunned at the level of corruption, deceit, cowardness that makes up our government. Our government is evil. Our government is complicit in all of the ills and sins that are happening in the world. Our government that's blown up the Middle East at the tune of $8 trillion, blew it up. And we listened. I had on this show yesterday, and I showed Sarah Adams on the Sean Ryan show talking about Al-Qaeda being here. Over at least 1,000 came through the open borders. But why wouldn't Al-Qaeda want to come? Let's reverse it. And Rand Paul's father, I always forget his name, Mr. Paul, the old senior. He said, let's reverse this. What if it was China that had occupied America, blew us up, just blew us to smithereens, can't drive anywhere. Interstates are blowing up. Schools are blowing up. Our wives have to be searched all the time. Chinese soldiers are ransacking our houses, killing our family. What would we do? Well, my God, we would be called the terrorist, because people like myself would be out there at the dark of night. Anybody that was wearing a Chinese military uniform, I'd be trying to decapitate. And then if those idiots in China opened their borders and said, come on in, oh, you're damn straight I would be in that country, ready to kill every Chinese person I get my hands on. So for this idea that we're shocked that this is happening to America it shocks me. Your stupidity, your ignorance shocks me. You want to know something's going to shock you? I'm going to have someone come on here in 1 minute. His name's Ryan Matta. He is producing documentaries at such a rate it's mind-blowing. And when you see his documentaries, and as he says, I think I've kicked a hornet's nest. Yes, you have. You've hit the worst thing that you can do, Ryan Matta, and that is to show with a glaring spotlight what is driving all the global sin on planet Earth, and that is sex with children, called raping children, selling them. Ryan Matta is uncovering all of this. And strangely enough, the epicenter of the corruption seems to be Guatemala. We're going to dive right into it. But before I bring him in, I need you to understand who this guy is. I have maybe less than people I can count on one hand that if I was in trouble, I could call and say, hey, dude, I desperately need some help, and he would be there. I've known Ryan less than a year. But because of the time he and I spent together traveling across America in the same car, staying in the most bizarre Airbnbs you've ever seen in your life, filming our 2 documentaries, I would consider him a best friend, somebody I can count on in the trenches, and I hope that he feels the same way about me. You are not going to meet an individual, and I do not say this lightly or as becoming on my show. In fact, if you go back and you look at any kind of shows, interviews that I've been on, I say the same thing about him. The hardest working guy you're ever going to meet, tireless. He is ambitious, determined. He's a great father, a Christian, and he believes he's on a mission right now. And it's hard for me to say, well, yeah, that guy's on a mission. No, this guy's on a mission. And his mission is to show what is transpiring in the world in child sex trafficking and saving the children. With that, can you please bring Ryan Matta in? Ryan, welcome to the show, man. You like my studio that you built?
Man, that's one sexy looking studio, bro. I'm jealous, man. I'm digging that. I was actually sending screenshots of that to a couple of my buddies that are looking to do something similar, and I was like, man, JJ's got this studio, man. It looks so good.
It's so good. I just hit a button. I go and the joke throughout my time with Ryan Matta when we first started filming together is he would be like, I don't understand how you don't understand technology. And finally I was like, okay, time out, man. You are 20 years younger than me. You grew up and born into technology. I was doing typewriters in college and the Border Patrol, and I'm trying to catch up, right? So, Ryan, I know your time's short, and I know we're on time crunch here on the show, so I don't want to waste any time because what you are uncovering. Look, you and I did two documentaries, the What is Treason series, Trafficked, all about child sex trafficking, and Invaded, about the invasion in the southern border, all tied together. You've gone a step further, and you have a documentary that is pinned on X, your X account, at Ryan Matta Media, for free. And it shows all of the trafficking, how it's being done. Go ahead and please just take a few minutes. Just let's start there and talk about this third documentary you did called Operation Amber Alert, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, you know, JJ, and it stemmed because I thought for sure, I think we both kind of thought that like Trafficked was going to blow the roof off this thing. I thought so many people were going to watch that documentary because that's what we knew we really needed. You needed the masses to watch that. And I thought for sure that that was such a good documentary, but people are so, I don't know what it is. If they just want to bury their head in the sand, they just want to la, 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 pretend like it's not happening. So maybe the paywall or being any excuse to not see it and, or to not get involved in it. Maybe that was just, there was just a barrier. So I said, oh, screw it. I'm going to put one out for free just to see if I can wake up the masses. So that's how that one came out. And really, I just threw that one together as fast as I possibly could just to get something out to say, hey, and I wanted to draw the timeline, and I wanted to show people methodically the process of how this has been funded, and specifically how that rhino sleazebag scumbag Speaker Johnson has increased funding to every one of these NGOs by 35 to 91%. And this is, and for your audience to understand that, you know, even he gave them more money than Speaker Pelosi. And when Speaker Pelosi was Speaker, you know, I don't even know if the last round of funding, if the 85,000, which was the big, you know, unveiling of these 85,000 children they lost, we hear our politician talk about the same exact number for almost 2 years, like it didn't increase at all. And I wanted to show them that when Speaker Pelosi gave them all the money, that number wasn't even released. It wasn't until Speaker Johnson and McCarthy took over that we were well aware of exactly what was going on there. They had congressional hearings, they had oversight, and there was, I think, 128 or 127 politicians that sat on the committees specifically that investigated these child trafficking of these migrant children. And it's those people that continued to fund this operation. So I really wanted to drive that nail home because I'm so sick of people watching people like Speaker Mike Johnson walking to the UFC with President Trump and getting cheered like this man's on our side or he's, you know, one of the good guys, when this is the man who's literally funded every single deep state operation on the face of this earth. And the craziest part about this whole thing was, JJ, after that documentary release, now me and you have done two, I've done one of my own, so we got 3 out total. You would think that one of these scumbags in our government, just one of them, or one law enforcement agency or the FBI, anybody would have said, hey, Ryan, you know, would you like to come into our office and talk to us and just hear what we have to say, or maybe tell us what you've learned in your investigations and years of putting your, you know, life on the line to do this? Not one. I get my documentary translated into Spanish. 24 hours later, I'm contacted by the Guatemala's Attorney General's office asking if I would come to Guatemala to talk to them about what I've uncovered and their ongoing investigations that they have into these NGOs that are trafficking children. I thought I was going there just to investigate and hear about this child trafficking, JJ, and it's such a bigger picture. I'm going to kind of land it there. I want to talk about a couple things. So just so you're aware, so your audience is aware, I got internal documents from the Guatemala, the MP's office, which is their Attorney General's office of Guatemala, that they've been trying to contact our government, and they have not received a gosh damn word, JJ, not a peep from our government. And we're talking about, so your audience knows, when me and JJ talk about this number, 500,000, the official number that's on the government websites as of October of 2024, a total of 452,121 unaccompanied children have arrived at our border. That's the official number. And as of December 14th of 2024, Tom Homan openly admitted to the number of lost children now is up to 340,000. So to put this into big perspective, why I was contacted by the Guatemala Attorney General's office is because over the last 4 years, 190,000 children have been kidnapped and trafficked out of Guatemala, brought into America, and processed in migratorily to the system. And the Attorney General's office knows that there's Guatemalan children in these facilities that are being funded with our tax dollars and they're being raped. And our government knows about it. The Texas government knows about it. And they were interested in doing a joint raid on a couple of these NGOs. But I'll kind of land it there and we'll kind of walk through it together.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning of this third documentary, because I want your audience to understand I lived this with Ryan, going and filming 2 documentaries. I lived it in the Border Patrol, so I know exactly what Ryan was laying out. And it was so well done, Ryan. Like I text you and said, hey, this was genius, the way you laid it out. So when you want to know, like information is key. If you don't know how they're doing it, you just spout out and go, hey, we have child sex trafficking. No, you slow down and say, no, this is how they're doing it. The federal government is funding the NGOs. The NGOs are trafficking them up through international money, the IOM, George Soros, etc. But once it gets to America, we start funding, even before, but mainly right in America, we begin to fund it. What Ryan Matta alluded to, too, is Speaker Johnson, as we were talking about that traitor in the opening. And Ryan's absolutely correct. That man, under his first CR that he did, appropriated $7.9 billion, that's with a B, for the NGOs. That was after it was already exposed that the NGOs were trafficking children and were the movement mechanism vehicle were taking millions of people from the border and transporting them into America. Nancy Pelosi would have never brought a bill with that money for the NGOs because no one would vote for it. But over 100 Republicans and all the Democrats voted for it. He is the problem. But Ryan, I'm gonna interview someone that you connected me with. He's an attorney, Diego Sagastume. I hope I'm pronounced right. Sagastume. Tomorrow, I want to dive in, like you just said. You went down to Guatemala to talk about child sex trafficking, but that's not what you uncovered. That was like almost a side crime. I'm not diminishing child sex trafficking by any means, but the crime is even bigger. It's even more insane. I would not even be able to write a movie script because I would have jumped the shark and they would say no one would believe it. Let's go from there.
So yeah, to tee you up on this one, JJ. So I started to write the script for this documentary, and just for me to methodically kind of walk people through the process, there's no way it's fitting into one. It's going to have to be a part 1 and a part 2 because it's so massive, and it goes back. It's actually probably going to be a 4-part like documenting miniseries on this corruption. But I'm going to start at the very beginning with the trafficking, and then we're going to go into the rigged elections, because our government, via these NGOs and the CIA, the State Department, and USAID, runs these foreign governments like they are a gosh damn Gestapo. Our government goes in and infiltrates these foreign countries with USAID. They pose as like they're this aid department. They're going to fund infrastructure. They're going to fund governments. They're going to fund operations. They're going to bring in business partners. Whatever excuse USAID goes to operate in your country. Well, once USAID is established in your country, the money starts to flow in. So I hired a private investigator firm. The guy goes by the name of Rando Lands _US over on X. And this guy's like a construction worker who's smart and understands how to code. And he built a software that allows him, we all have access to these government databases, right? Like usfunding.org or whatever the 3 that are out there are. And if you can access them together with code and pull all of the information and put it into one pool and then sort it, which is what he's done, you really get an understanding of the big picture of how much money our government spent. So the first thing I did when I got invited was I contacted him. This man ran a report initially for the last 4 years. And over the last 4 years, our government has sent into Guatemala $797 million. Then I actually hired him for the full report, which cost me almost $3,500. And he went all the way back to 2012 for me under Obama's years. And since 2012, our government has sent $4,098 million to Guatemala. Now, this money is just like these NGOs. There's never been an audit. There's no oversight. Nobody's holding anybody accountable. And that money goes into USAID, a majority, and then USAID distributes it to this network of NGOs. And then our government's also distributing it to those NGOs through grants, scholarships, contracts, awards. And then I think they also do investments as one of the key categories. So to put that into context, and when you hear people like George Soros say that he can buy any judge or any district attorney or win any district attorney race here in America for 25 grand, until this year when the corrupt, illegitimate party of Guatemala gave themselves a 400% raise, prior to that, the salary for a member of Congress was $1,000 a month. So Guatemala's Congress makes $1,000 a month. Imagine how easy it is to buy these politicians off, these judges off in a third world country like that, when you have $797 million at your disposal. So what they do is they start out by, in my personal opinion, is they create these front organizations for the CIA and the State Department. It's their way to launder money and to promote their agenda. Then they start like headhunting and recruiting high-level Guatemalan officials. These are Guatemalan nationals. And it's almost like they groom them into positions of either having dirt on them, whether we know, and with the dirt is always pedophilia. It seems to be, it's almost always that these people are willing to rape children. They get busted raping children. Then they have that control over you. Then they groom you and they build you into being a politician. They groom you into running media outlets. Doesn't matter. But once they take control of the media, and everybody here that's watching this show should be well aware, you can totally tell that every mainstream media outlet in America is compromised. So if you think they can compromise the media here in America, you have to be under the same mindset that they can compromise it even easier in these third world countries. And that's exactly what they do. Once they get control of your media, then they have the unlimited tool to market whatever politicians that they want. And they amplify the message for the politicians that they like. And then they target and attack any politician who gives them any type of resistance. And over a 20-year period, it's not hard to believe that our government has literally taken over control or installed a puppet government that we run. So when I tell people that the most important thing that I think we've all been overlooking here in America is it's these ambassadors to these third world countries. These ambassadors in these third world countries are more gosh damn powerful than the president because they control the media, they control the politicians or a majority of the politicians, they control the Supreme Court, they control the judges, they get cases transferred to the judges that they do control, they get cases thrown out, they get cases dismissed. But it's even more crazy than that. Then you mix in the EU and the UN, and our government has forced them back. Oh, this goes back to 2003. That's kind of where my investigation kind of picks up, is this when our government pressured Guatemala to create this, they made Guatemala sign this treaty, which then allowed them to create this police state in Guatemala. It created, if you will, the FBI of Guatemala, called the CCG, and they named it some bull crap like the Anti-Corruption, Bureau of Investigation or whatever it is. It's obviously it's that name. It's like the Patriot Act, right? We know it's like the anti-corruption. The only thing that it did was it was corrupt. And they used this as a weaponized tool to not target their political opponents. Because that would make international news, right? What they did is they used it to go after the millionaires that were very successful business owners in Guatemala that were funding the conservative politicians. So you take out their funding, you immediately kneecap those politicians from having a shot at like actually running a legit campaign. And over from like basically the inception of the idea was spawned in 2003. It was created, I think, in like 2006. And then it ran all the way till 2017, where this Ivan, and I'm going to say his name wrong, so we'll just call him Ivan, was like the director of the CCG. He was their final director of the CCG. He was involved with trying to stage a coup and take out a president, where they were trying to get the vice president of the country to overthrow the president of Guatemala, and they failed. And then Jimmy Morales, this president, basically dissolved the CCG. Now, when he dissolved it, the director of that CCG, this Ivan guy, flees Guatemala because now he's a fugitive, right? He goes to Colombia, where at the time that he fled, I believe Anthony Blinken gave him some type of award, right? So if you look at all these awards to all these people, you're going to see anybody that Anthony Blinken has given an award for, an anti-corruption award, Patriot of the Year award. Those are all the deep state bureaucrat hacks that have carried out operations for our CIA and our State Department. So this man flies to Colombia, and guess what he's doing now, JJ? He's the border czar of Colombia. And guess who is taking over? Guess Todd Bedsman said, what did he tell Trump last week? That you need to label Colombia a terrorist state because the cartels have taken over the entire gosh damn country. And I can tell you that for certain because I've been offered the opportunity to go to Colombia, where I can go to a cafe and I can order a 14-year-old girl at a cafe like I'm getting a cappuccino, and then the waitress will let me buy her or rent her, and then I'll go to a hotel room and I can have my way with her, and then I just deliver her back to the coffee shop. That is how rotten and corrupt. So from there, the Attorney General, this Thelma lady, was also the Attorney General that we installed in 2014. And by 2016, because she was forcing her woke ideology and her woke politics and basically being a puppet for our deep state, the law in Colombia or in Guatemala was that the president didn't have the authority to fire, or the president in Guatemala at that time had the authority to fire the Attorney General. So our deep state puts pressure on their legislative branch to change the law in Guatemala so that the president doesn't have the authority to fire this Attorney General. And it sticks, and they get that law passed. Now, fast forward, because the way that it works in Guatemala is the president's term overlaps the attorney general. So like how Trump gets elected and he gets to pick the attorney general, in Guatemala, that's not the case. When the president gets elected, he's still stuck with the previous attorney general from the previous president for 2 years. But after that 2-year period, he gets to pick who he wants to be as attorney general. So after this happens, right, our government now is at a point where they've rigged the election in Guatemala in 2023. And I can prove that. And the gentleman that's going to come on your show tomorrow is going to actually prove that. So I won't get into all the facts of the election fraud, but you guys can just take my word for it that because it's same day, it's hard concept to comprehend for Americans. It's same day, paper ballots, in-person voting, voter ID. And the most important part we overlook here in America is it's handwritten paper ballot, right? They're not filling out a little tab, like a little circle and putting it into a machine. They're actually, or checking a box and seeing what name you like. They are actually writing in manually handwriting in each politician's name that they want to vote for. And that's a really key part of this about fighting against this fraud. That's how it should be done here in America. So all of that information gets uploaded to a cloud so you can see it all there. Within 5 days of this election taking place, the Attorney General's office receives over 1,000 complaints of voter fraud. Now, there's also there's 3 types of election fraud that are going on in Guatemala. There was the purchasing of the voting machines. So just like in Brazil, when our government in 2022, when we had that huge semiconductor shortage, and our government started to divert semiconductors inbound from Taiwan to America over to Brazil so that they could deliver 4 times more voting machines, Dominion voting machines, that had ever been used in a Brazilian election. And then 5 months before, because Bolsonaro started to question the election, William Burns from the CIA flies to Brazil with 50 of his CIA homies to tell Bolsonaro, the president of that country, that he needs to shut his mouth and he needs to stop questioning or casting doubt on the elections in Brazil. And then 2 weeks before the election, Mark Milley and our DOJ fly over to Brazil and they arrest all of the top military lieutenants and generals in Brazil so that if Bolsonaro went to go grab those machines and basically say that this election was fraudulent, that he wouldn't have anybody to do so. So we know that our government carried out the coup in Brazil and overthrew their government and carried out that regime change. So now here in Guatemala, they put pressure on their electoral college. There's 4 of them, which are rotten and corrupt, which are all under investigation. I believe they've been stripped of their power now because of the purchasing of this TREP voting machine, TREP. And this TREP voting machine was 149 million quetzal. I forget their currency. It's about 19 million US. The other options were 13 million and then below 13 million. So there's this $6 million discrepancy for a system that is all it's doing is scanning a ballot and uploading it to a cloud. It's not a complex system, and there's no justification for why you would spend an extra $6 or $7 million to purchase this software. So we have the fraud, which is the actual ballots. We have the purchasing of the software. And then we also have the creation of the Semilla party. So the party itself, now this one's really interesting because this one's already gone through court and it's been dissolved. So this illegitimate party with this president ran on, it would be like if the Democrat Party was corrupt or illegitimately created, right? If our government went over there and created this illegitimate party via fraud, and they did so by using fraudulent signatures. So in Guatemala, when you want to create an electoral party, like the Democrat Party, for example, there's a process. You have to get so many signatures. And based off the amount of population size in the country of Guatemala, depends on how many signatures you have to get. So at the time, it was 22,671 signatures. The party got 25,111 signatures. Out of that, 8,550 were fraudulent. Right, so they were void. They had like 40 people that were dead at the time of signing it that never signed it. You had 13 citizens that came in and said, "My name's on that ballot, on that application. I never signed that affidavit." And then you had 5,000 something that were just created out of thin air. These people didn't exist. And then you had 2,900 something duplicates. So that went through the court system. That's been proven. So now the party that this president actually belongs to has been completely dissolved. It doesn't exist. So the president no longer belongs to any party. The party's been dissolved and doesn't exist. Now the voting machines, these voting machines, right? For her to investigate the purchasing of this voting system because of the checks and balances that they have there in Guatemala, she has to go and take that evidence. She can't even open an investigation unless somebody brings her complaints. So legal complaints were filed with the Attorney General's office. She takes them, she looks at them, she can't even investigate them, but she can kind of put all of the evidence together into one example or one presentation, and then she has to go present that to Congress. They have 160 members of their Congress. There is no Senate in Guatemala, just Congress. So she takes it and she presents the evidence that she was given and says, hey, here, Congress, you need to review this. Here's what I've been given. Can I have the authority to investigate this? Out of the 160, JJ, 108 of them looked at that information and go, yeah, there's plenty of enough fraud here. We're going to give you the authority to investigate. 4 days later, Anthony Blinken uses his power because of I forget, it's not the Magnitsky Act, it's the Ellis Act or something. There's the Ellison, Diego will tell it about tomorrow. There's some act that our government created, which gives our State Department the ability to label these political leaders in these third world countries as corrupt. And if you get put on this corruption list, then all of a sudden they can basically strip away your visas. So Anthony Blinken, 4 days later, suspends the visas to 108 members of the Guatemalan government, and then goes a step further and freezes all of their assets here in America. Now, let me remind you, these are Guatemalan politicians that have been in the game for 25 years. These are people that have been diehard allies to the United States for 20 years and done everything that we've asked. They've been a great ally. And here comes in the Gestapo Blinken, because they voted to give this attorney general the ability to investigate the election fraud that took place in Guatemala, strips their visas, and then the Gestapo goes a step further. Then he suspends the visas of 400 of their friends, family, and relatives. Let me remind you, at the time, these politicians are making $1,000 a month in Guatemala. They have their children that they've probably saved up for 10, 12 years to get them to a university in America. And their children were having to get ripped out of these universities, probably not getting refunded because they're labeled as corrupt politicians in Guatemala, and they're on this list, the Ingo list, I think is what it's called. And then, so yeah, that's kind of the big picture of this fraud. And I'll kind of land it there because I'm going to tie it into the child trafficking here in a minute. But I just wanted to explain to your audience how rotten and corrupt our gosh damn government is. This drug trafficking that we thought that Trump was going to have a problem with the cartels. Oh, no. It's not the cartels, JJ. It's our gosh damn government that the cartels work for. The heads of these cartels are our government.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And I had a very long conversation with the attorney that we're talking to tomorrow that has been maybe a great source of your information as well. And I asked him, and I'm going to ask you this, and I asked him point blank, I said, are you telling me that Blinken and our government went down there and did everything they did and tried to get the attorney general fired and then helped get that illegitimate president elected, all to cover up the child sex trafficking that's occurring in Guatemala? And he said without hesitation, Ryan, yes. I'm gonna let you take it from there and then tie into who's involved in the main NGO, and that's why Blinken is there. And this is unbelievable.
So JJ, after everything I told you, none of that got Blinken on a flight to Guatemala. None of it, right? So on April 12th, let me read you a letter that was sent to Attorney General Ken Paxton, because I think a lot of us thought Paxton was on our side. A lot of us thought Paxton was fighting the Biden deep state, including the Guatemalan government, who gave him a pass when they handed me this information. And they said they felt like out of all the people that they wrote letters to, which I have about 9 people here we can talk to about that in a minute, but they thought Ken Paxton was getting attacked by the Biden administration. So maybe, maybe he didn't get this letter. Maybe something happened. I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt. I want to be as loud as humanly possible, because as of today, and I've been on a lot of podcasts, a lot of big news, a lot of people have heard this, even rumors that have come back, that I need to stop calling out Ken Paxton, and I'm not going to listen to any of these scumbags. So this letter states, this is directly from the Attorney General of Guatemala to the Attorney General of Texas, and it says, it was a pleasure to greet you and wish you your success in your daily activities. By higher instruction, I am writing you to request, if you will consider it appropriate, your immediate attention to a serious situation affecting the Republic of Guatemala. As a public ministry, we have received complaints as criminal reports about a very important and sensitive issue, our beloved children. As you know, deficiencies in security and diplomacy related to the border between the United States and Mexico have resulted in a significant increase in drug trafficking, but also a devastating emergence of human trafficking. In relation to the new complaint that has been filed with this institution, a horrifying pattern of the disappearance of Guatemalan children has been brought to our attention. It has been reported to the public ministry that a complex network involving NGOs, non-governmental organizations operating within Guatemala who collaborate with specific entities in Texas are implicated in the abuse of Guatemalan children when they are away from their parents and they do not have anybody to protect them. Those Guatemalan children have been reportedly placed in shelters and organizations throughout Texas under the guise of providing them with a family environment. Disturbingly, there have been reports and documented situations of sexual abuse in these shelters, which you and I know that's exactly what's happening. We have a huge violation of the rights and dignity of these children. And here it is. The state of Texas bears much of the responsibility for these lost children who have been transferred to the border, processed migratorily into Texas, and Texas is apparently fully aware of the situation. Among these non-governmental organizations in Guatemala and the state of Texas that may be involved in this child trafficking operation, the involvement of, and I want your audience to do me a favor here. If there's a mama bear, if you guys are sitting at home, if you have time to get on your computer and dig into these NGOs, please, please, please do everything that you can to track the money, follow the money, learn who's sitting on the board of directors, where those people on the board of directors came from, how they're connected to our politicians, because here's the list. Save the Children, Changing the Way We Care, the World Childhood Foundation, number 3, Arise, number 4, and number 5 is La Unión del Pueblo Entero, and that is PUEBLOENTERO. And they say this is concerning. But what was particularly alarming about these organizations is that they are receiving federal funds from American taxpayers. I have been informed that other non-governmental organizations operating in Guatemala and Texas could also be accomplices of the child trafficking, possibly supporting this trafficking and other issues of unaccompanied children and adolescents traveling. But all of them have proven unsuccessful in protecting children in Guatemala. Now, the public ministry is obligated to protect the human rights and interests of the inhabitants of Guatemala, will spare no effect and exhaust all necessary efforts to locate and criminally prosecute those responsible for this enormous tragedy. Be assured that the Attorney General and Chief of the Ministry of Publico of the Republic of Guatemala will zealously execute a legal mandate to eradicate this epidemic of child trafficking and hold those who commit these crimes against humanity accountable. I respectfully request that you contact us as soon as possible to agree on a joint effort amid at resolving this humanitarian crisis for which your country is directly responsible in part. Without further ado, I subscribe with the highest expression of my consideration and esteem. Truly yours regards. Now, pay attention to the date on that, JJ, because that was on April 12th of 2024. So now fast forward April 25th, after hearing no word from Ken Paxton. What a perfect gosh damn opportunity for our government to go in a joint effort with all the evidence. You have an attorney general that's telling you that they have the evidence that these NGOs are trafficking children. It wouldn't be hard for you, Ken Paxton, to get a warrant, would it? No, it wouldn't. And together, we could have raided all of these NGOs because they're all connected. They're all transferring funds between one another, and they're all transferring children between one another. So we know that. That's an absolute fact. She raids the foundation along with those others on that list, JJ. 10 days later, maybe 11 days later, Anthony Blinken is on a flight to Guatemala to hold a press conference with the president, this illegitimate, corrupt president that our government has installed. And you want to know what he says in this press conference, JJ? He says, President Corrupt, I want to congratulate you on what an amazing campaign you have been running on your anti-corruption campaign. So this president ran his campaign on how he was going to get the Attorney General of Guatemala fired. Just like Letitia James ran her campaign on how she was going to get Trump, this president has ran his campaign on how he was going to get this Attorney General. And since the day that he took office, before he even took office, before the election even started, this man has been on a nonstop, relentless assault against his Attorney General. Anthony Blinken then goes on to tell the president of Guatemala how much money is going to come into Guatemala and what a great opportunity it's going to be for Guatemala. But here's the kicker. If you don't get rid of this corruption problem in Guatemala, not so sure if any of that money is going to come in. Meaning, if you don't get this Attorney General fired, the only person that has the ability to investigate this child trafficking networks and the only person that has the ability to investigate this election fraud, if you don't get her fired, well, you ain't getting the money.
Now, why What's the connection? What's the connection between the NGOs and our government? What is the big one? What's the biggest thing in those NGOs?
So I know you're not going to believe this, JJ, but Jill Biden, right, in 2017, was selected to be the chair of the board of directors of Save the Children. And that was advertised on CBS TV, right? So we know without a doubt that's happening. That happened. And then, JJ, I can take you a little bit further. If you go all the way back to 1985, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's wife, was running campaign fundraisers for Save the Children. In 2011 or 13, 2007, 2009, I believe, that time frame, Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation were involved with Save the Children. In 2012 and 2014, the Obama Foundation was involved with Save the Children. In 2000 and I got the whole list here. It goes on, JJ. In my personal opinion, when we talk about this elite network of pedophiles that are getting children delivered to their doorstep, to the White House, Pizzagate, Podesta, all of that, right? I believe that Save the Children is in some way intricated into this network that delivers minor children to politicians here in the United States for the pleasure of raping these little children. And that's how these 6 scumbags have carried out this blackmail operation. We know that we had, and this isn't even a far stretch, Jeffrey Epstein was delivering little boys and girls to Bill Clinton in the White House. Jeffrey Epstein visited Bill Clinton in the White House 7 times. And in the court orders and these court documents, Bill Clinton is labeled as Jeffrey Epstein's most prolific client, meaning nobody visited Epstein's Island more times than President Bill Clinton. He had a photo of Bill Clinton in a dress, meaning I got you by the balls and I own you. And that was in Epstein's house on his island. So this is not, it's not far-fetched to think that there is something that immediately, day one, Kash Patel should be opening an immediate investigation. Every one of these NGOs should be raided. Tom Homan talks about how he's going to deputize American citizens. Well, I hope that there's a special task force that is specifically tasked at doing nothing but investigating every gosh damn penny that every one of these NGOs got, where they spent that money, who that money was going to, and how much of it has came back into these politicians' campaigns, how much of it has been used to create polling locations. We know that Southwest Key Programs, at least in 2020 and in 2022, or at least in 2022, were running polling locations for the midterms. You could go cast your ballot as an American citizen at a location that is ran by Southwest Key Programs, who is the #1 child trafficking NGO in America. And if I pull up the lawsuit between the DOJ and Southwest Key Programs, it would take me 20 minutes, JJ, just to read off the crimes that were committed against these children. So I'll land it there and toss it back to you. That's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot to unpack, and I'm hoping to have you come on the vault where we can have, because this is a 3-hour conversation, Ryan. This is a slow down, go piece by piece, because what you're saying is factually true. You had to go through it quickly, right? And you did a masterful job, as you always do. But when you look at the totality of the evil of our federal government, and then you begin, as you and I, Ryan, Matt, and I were driving all over America, right? We would, and when we were in Texas, I think we were there for 72 hours. We drove 65 of the 72 hours, drive. And he and I would talk, and we could not believe it. I think it was at that time, Ryan, that we started thinking or coming to a conclusion, oh my gosh, child sex trafficking is the story. The open border is the great big crime, but what is sucking the oxygen out of everything is pedophilia and child sex trafficking in America. And through our interviews on camera and off camera, meaning on the record and off the record, we were told, you need to get your head straight. You have congressmen, senators, presidents that are pedophiles. This goes to the highest level of our government. Ryan, I just got off a phone call today with a digital forensic analyst, and I'm not going to go into the detail of who she is, but very reputable. And she says to me, we have already identified 124 politicians that are in pedophilia, and they're raping children. Either raping children, pedophilia, or they're on the other, she called the governmental side, that are making money off it. I'm going to investigate further and open that can of worms. What you're doing is, and I don't have time to show this, but I will maybe later, is there's a part of your documentary where you say that you're called from God to do this. You and I've had these conversations. I believe that you are called for God to do this. I also very aware, as I've told you, you need to let me know when you leave the country so there's someone that is following you, because you have said this, and rightfully so. Ryan would look at me sometimes, we were driving, and he would say, do you know that no one that has ever talked or broached this subject the way that we are is still alive? Meaning the powers to be do not want this to come out. But I will tell you this, Ryan, something is happening in the world, and more specifically in America, where it feels as if the truth is coming up no matter how much challenge or blockage that the evil wants to stop it. It's just coming. You can feel it. It's just coming. No one's going to stop you. I want you to keep going. I hope you come back on. I could go another 2 or 3 hours. That's why I would like to either do a Zoom or have you fly into the studios and do a long form, because you're going back down there to Central America to do further investigation. Tell us what the next documentary is going to expose, or what you're planning on documenting while you're down there.
So this one right here is, I'm going to lay out everything that we just talked about step by step, because the Guatemalan people, they're like half of America in 2020, right? They were still psyoped into believing that Trump was in hotels in Russia peeing on prostitutes because of the, what was that report that Gary Gensler paid? Yeah, the Russiagate investigation, right? So Guatemalan people have been psyoped, and a lot of them think that this attorney general is the enemy. Anthony Blinken put together a protest for 180 days. Mobs of people stood outside the attorney general's office and protested because they were trying to put pressure on the current president to remove her. So that way, when the illegitimate president came in, it wasn't on his plate and make it look like he did it, right? And this story is so big, JJ, and there's so much to unpack. I'd love to come back on your show. Whenever you want to have me, we can do it 2 or 3 hours and really dissect this entire thing, because that's what it needs. It needs more sunlight. It needs people like you that fully understand it. I know I was so excited to come on your show because I know you get it, man. And I know when I start telling these things, you're like, okay, cool. What's next? How are we connecting these dots? And I use your analogy, right? It's the favorite one that anybody's told me. And JJ says this all the time, right? If I'm painting a picture and that picture has 100 dots, if I connect 70 or 80 of those dots, I have a gosh damn great idea of what that picture is going to look like. I might not know every detail, but if there's enough there, I could probably finish it without any other dots present. We're starting to paint this picture, JJ, and it's really coming together. And it's because patriots like you that are willing to speak up. And that's what everything that JJ said about me, I could speak 10 times more highly about this man. If there's one man that I would go into battle with, it's JJ. And it's people like that we need to make sure are in this next administration. And we should all be speaking for him as loudly as possible, trying to get the attention of everybody we can, because these are the men that we need at the highest positions inside our government that have authority, that we know that are going to put America first and our interests first. So God bless you, man. I appreciate you bringing me on your show, and we can keep going. I mean, I can stick around. I don't know what your time schedule is like. You got a few more minutes, but.
Dude, I'm looking at my clock. As I look down, my clock is saying 4 minutes. I don't have anything else. I could go forever. So what I would like to ask you is, when you have a chance, and you and I will talk about this offline, when you have 2-3 hours that you can give me, even if it's in the middle of the night, I know how you work, and you know how I work. So we'll get together and let's do it, because you are a truth teller. I tell people this all the time. If this man is not in movie studios or colleges that have media teaching people how to do this, how to do real-time documentaries, then they're missing out. I always say people that are going to look at the documentaries that Ryan Matta creates, and they're going to say, well, that's a Matta documentary. That's how he filmed it, right? Yep. You're just 6 months away from that actually happening. I have the greatest respect for you. I want you to stay safe. We'll stay in touch, but I want to do a long form with you because this is as great as it was. It doesn't do it justice because the levels of corruption, Ryan, within our federal government and how evil we are and everything we have done to the world. America has destroyed the world, made it go off center. We own this problem. But unless people like you that get out there and do it, no one's going to know it. And I want people to go to Ryan Matta. I want people to go to @Ryan Matta Media. Watch the documentary. It's free. And then he has a Give, Send, Go. He has places to donate. This man's doing it on his own. It costs exorbitant amounts of money. Think of flying to Guatemala one time, hotels and flying back, thousands of dollars. Hours upon hours upon hours of editing and film. Please support this man. Let me
throw this at you too, JJ, right? Like, I am to a point where I am so terrified of my own government that I sleep with my gun in my gosh damn waistband. I am so terrified that my own government is going to come into my home and execute or assassinate me because I'm trying to expose child trafficking. Mm-hmm. Listen to that, America. Listen, when your government gets so tyrannical that for your ability to achieve life or chase life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is no longer possible, it is your God-given duty and your obligation to your nation to throw off said government or remove said government and reinstall a new form of government that serves we the people. It's got to that point, guys. It literally has got to that point. And our government is so rogue and so tyrannical, and they are getting and acquiring so much power now with AI and drones. They no longer have to send us off to war to start these wars. They can do it with machines. And if we don't take that control back, the censorship we saw in 2020, the police state, the 15 mini cities, the vaccine passports, it's all coming, America. This is the time to wake up. So I encourage you to get involved, support people like JJ, share this content, hit that like button. God bless you, JJ. I appreciate you for bringing me on, man.
Thank you, Ryan. Take care. We'll talk offline. Thank you.
God bless.
Dude, that was, I think, the fastest. Logan, I think he was on there for 45 minutes. That's the fastest 45 minutes that I've ever. Wow. Ryan Matta Media on X. It's on pinned right on the top of his X account. The free documentary, Operation Amber Alert. The guy is beyond talented. He is beyond courageous. He is beyond tenacious. I consider him like a brother. That man, I'll go to war with that guy. I will. Very, very few people that I'll say that about, even throughout my career in the Border Patrol. Ryan Matta is one of those men. America, support him.